webinar. Hey everybody, welcome. We'll just let you funnel in. Our speakers are coming across. Welcome, welcome. A few people joining. Great. Welcome everybody. We'll kick off in a minute's time. We're just having our speakers come across. Okay. Welcome. We'll kick off in sort of 1 minute's time. We'll just let you funnel through. Okay. We'll be kicking off in 1 minute, team. We're just waiting on one of our speakers to come across. They're just on the other side. Awesome. Thanks all for joining. This is our second last session of Campfire. It's been an incredible last 3 days, so we're really looking forward to this one with you. We'll just kick off in a second's time. We're just waiting for our last speaker, Nicole, to come through from our backstage VIP area. There she is. Awesome. Hey Nicole, we're through. Great. We'll kick off, team. Thank you again for joining. So, tonight's session is on understanding early trauma, signs, and strategies. Just before we kick off, just like to mention that throughout the session, we'll be taking sort of questions or any comments that you have. You can pop those in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Looks like a little chat box with a question mark in it. So feel free to just drop any comments or questions throughout the session, and we'll try to get to all of those throughout. Awesome. So good evening, everyone. We're addressing a topic both challenging and essential: early trauma in young children, and how we as ECE professionals can recognize its signs and respond constructively. First off, it's important for us to define trauma. Trauma is the emotional, psychological, and physiological residue left over from the result of an event or a series of events that cause a child to feel helpless and push beyond their ability to cope. As educators, we may not be therapists, but we often spend more time with these children than anyone else outside their families, placing us in a critical position to notice changes in behavior or mood. When we spot possible trauma and take supportive steps, we can significantly influence a child's emotional well-being and development. Tonight, we'll explore the signs of trauma in young children, how to navigate conversations with families who may be unaware or hesitant, and practical strategies to help children feel safe and supported. My name is Hayden, and I'll be facilitating tonight's session. I work in customer success at Mana here, and a former USH educator and hold a master's in positive psychology. But tonight, I'm really honoured to be welcomed by two of our experts in this field, Nicole and Rebecca. Nicole Nolan is an early childhood education consultant and the founder of Wise Learn Education, specializing in social emotional learning. With 30 years of experience in teaching and curriculum leadership, Nicole integrates neuroscience and SEL practices to create thriving learning environments for children. She has worked with schools, educators, and parents to promote well-being, resilience, and creativity in early education. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
And we also have Rebecca Van Herk, who holds a degree in psychology and has over 30 years of experience in out-of-home care, child protection, adolescent services, family support, and foster care. As a trauma consultant, Rebecca sees her role as a mentor and guide, helping parents and educators integrate trauma-informed principles into their daily interactions, attachments, and relationships with children and young people. By equipping them with the practical tools and knowledge, she aims to create nurturing environments where individuals can heal, grow, and thrive. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Awesome. So let's dive in tonight and shed light on this crucial issue and explore practical methods that can make a lifetime of difference. So first question, Rebecca, might throw to you. What behaviors or emotional indicators might hint at trauma in a child, and how do educators spot them?
Mm, Nice heavy question to start with, Hayden. Yeah. I think the thing to remember is a lot of our little people have experienced trauma in their lives, and trauma, as you've given with that definition, doesn't necessarily have to mean huge amounts of trauma. It can mean separation, divorce. It can mean having 4 different schools in a given year. It can be moving countries, moving states, things like that. They're traumatic experiences for children. And what our little people do after being exposed to trauma over long periods of time or multiple traumatic events is that they learn they're very good at hiding their pain, our little people. And instead, they don't have the words sometimes to be able to tell us what's going on, and it comes out in their behaviours. So this is where I think for educators, we have to learn to be good at reading behaviour, because sometimes our little people and sometimes our parents don't have the words to be able to tell us how they're feeling or what their needs are. Um, Children who have experienced complex trauma or developmental trauma often also don't have the skills to be able to ask for help because they don't know what they're asking for. Um, and at times, they also won't seek out adults as a source of comfort. So, again, it's up to us as being these people in their lives who often, as you said, may spend more time with them 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, um, helping them to start to learn to label their feelings and emotions, being able to help them organize their feelings and to put it into perspective. The way what I tend to see behaviours are is that they're flags. They're flags. We can read into them and try and make sense of them, but usually a behaviour says, please help me. I'm in a bit of pain or I'm in distress. And then it's our job as the adults that are around them, and particularly for teachers, is to start to be a detective. And it's a bit of a big role where we start to notice signs, but not all signs that children exhibit or behaviours mean that they've been traumatized as well. So we have to be a bit careful that we don't just lump kids with having tantrums or big behaviours as being traumatized. We have to start to build a picture of what's happened for our little people and then see whether or not we're looking at trauma behaviours, or are we looking at autism, or are we looking at ADHD, or are we looking at a combination of all of that, or are we just looking at fear? So if we want to put it into a kind of nutshell, what are some of the indicators we might start to be aware of or we start to be curious about? Will be things kids who have complex trauma or developmental trauma have trouble forming relationships. That's their big thing, either between peers or actually with adults. They don't seek adult support, or they don't find comfort from adults either, or they go too readily to adults, expecting them to fix up situations that they possibly could actually fix up themselves. They also have very poor self-regulation, okay? Self-regulation is a taught concept. We have to co-regulate and model for children for them to start to be able to put down like practices and a bit of a script on how to look after themselves when they're feeling big emotions. But most of the time, our little people go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. We think there's no lead in for some of these kids that have trauma behaviours. We expect them to sort of go through being a bit distressed to being upset to being a bit overwhelmed, and then they lose it. But our little people go from, no, you can't do that, to exploding and throwing a chair. So the range is a lot shorter. Also, children who have experienced trauma have negative thinking patterns. I can't do this. I'm stupid. I'm hopeless. Nobody notices me. Nobody likes me. So you'll hear little language start to come out. Also, hypervigilance is a big thing. These are our jumpy on edge kids, or they startle very easily, or they're constantly on the lookout for dangers, dangerous people, dangerous environments, dangerous children, dangerous circumstances. And they're usually very, very tired, these little people. They're exhausted because they're just on the go. They're on alert all the time. And our little people then come out with behaviors, which is sort of those fight, flight, fear, or fawn behaviors, which means they might be a bit aggressive, or they might be defiant, or they might have tantrums. But then we can have our little people that shut down, just go very quiet, very compliant, look like they are coping really well, but actually our little people are showing us maybe this circumstance or these people don't make me feel safe. We often see risk avoidant children, children who say, oh, I don't want to do that. There's that fear of making a mistake, of letting an adult down, or of the unpredictability of an adult. We see children with trauma behaviors often doing behaviors that are connection seeking. They're not attention seeking, they're connection seeking. So it's things like asking lots of questions. That's actually a connection seeking behavior that we think's just kind of normal. Or having big emotions about really small things. Or constantly asking you to play with them and needing you to be constantly in their sphere of safety. Crying or fussing about things that seem a bit dramatic or over the top compared to some other kids. Persistently trying to help you, or being the child who needs to control the space or give the rationale or give all the directions and therefore. So we tend to see those things. And those little people who say, please watch me, I need you to watch me 10 hours a day, where they constantly can't be satisfied or they feel invisible. So these are our little invisible people. And how do we spot them? Well, we start to learn to be really good at looking at behavior. And I find working with early educators, they're incredible at it, and they don't give themselves enough. They don't feel that they have all those skills, but they do. They're incredible barometers of working out kids' behavior. We want to be emotion detectives. We want to be detectives. We want to be curious about what's going on. And we want to start to see how children work with each other, but also how they work in the space with adults around them. And do they allow comfort, or do they actually not want comfort from adults and things? So as a teacher, it's learning to look at not the big behaviors. They're really easy to find. It's the little ones. It's the little person who very slowly says, oh, I don't want to draw that robot because I'm hopeless at it. Or a little person who just stands next to me and says, no one likes me, or no one ever actually says I'm good at anything. Things like that. So we're looking for sort of those low level signs rather than the big dramatic ones. And it is tricky to do that. But I think what I find with educators is they're actually very, very acutely aware of these. They just haven't brought it to the fact that they're actually making assessments of what's going on for kids with their behaviors, and especially trauma kids.
Wow, yeah, so much to unpack there. I can imagine. I like that analogy of detective, but I think what's unique in this is, unlike a Sherlock Holmes where almost every clue leads on to another, and it's like almost a perfect story in the end. There's such a variability to
Yeah,
this. So it could be someone having a big bang moment versus someone having, being in a corner withdrawn. It could be
yeah,
someone that doesn't want to seek out attention from an adult, but someone that is actively seeking it out. But
yeah,
it's that erratic nature that sounds like the key thing from a detective
yeah.
perspective, which is really interesting. And I'd love to, Nicole, I'd love to throw to you to understand, I guess, with from your neuroscience background, if you're able to help dissect, I guess, what's happening there, and also once you're able to detect that, what can educators then do to help support that child, even though we might not be trained therapists?
Yeah, for sure. So children who are having that reaction, like Rebecca said, they're going to be a fight, flight, freeze mode. So they're having a downstairs brain moment. So you're working out of your amygdala. Some people call it the meerkat brain, some people call it the guard dog, but basically it's your alarm system. I'm on alert, there's some sort of threat. So whether that's a perceived threat or an actual threat, usually it's a perceived threat. And for some children, they will get stuck there. So they're going to be in that freeze mode. When you are in that mode, so when you're in that part of your brain, you cannot get to your prefrontal cortex. That's where your relation build, that's where you problem solve, that's where you make decisions. So the reason why children are in a chronic stress state from a level of trauma, whatever trauma that might be, and like Rebecca said, that could be trauma from constant moving or different situations. It's not necessarily a high level. So, and the stress can happen to all children in some forms, but obviously the children who were exhibiting the signs that that Rebecca was talking about, they're going to be there a lot of the time. So you cannot get to your prefrontal cortex if you are in that stress state. So and also your hippocampus is going to be reduced too, so your memory aspects like that. So one of the important things is that educators, parents, and children, there is the capacity to break down those complex neuroscience tools and actually explain them. And that's what I do in the work that I do, is explain to educators how to actually do that. How do you break that down so that children actually understand why do I need to understand my brain and the body connection? And then we can also tap into the how. So what framework or structures can we put in place to support all children so they can navigate and understand stress and manage that stress? And that's what helps to build the self-awareness, which is understanding what your emotions are, and the self-management, which is how do I actually manage those emotions? And one of the core things that I think actually helps educators and parents and students the most is when it becomes a universal language for everybody. So putting universal strategies into classrooms or early childhood centres that actually build the regulation tools that are necessary to help children to calm down that meerkat brain. Basically what you're doing is you're exercising your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that's the switch between your alarm system and your calm system. And so doing particular activities and doing them in short bursts and building that framework within a day, both at home and school, is going to be very helpful. And I think one of the key things with that, and I think, Rebecca, you'll probably talk a lot more about this, is the co-regulation is about everybody doing it together. What little people need, the adults around them need as well. And when we can get the language and the understanding of our brain and how our bodies work, and then how to actually calm that down and build those tools in, then the children, regardless of whether it's high level trauma or even low grade, just chronic stress from busyness, is going to help everybody out.
Yeah, I really like the approach of having everyone on the same almost hymn sheet, or the language, understanding how this is working so they can work effectively as a team. And I'm curious actually, Rebecca, I might throw to you for this one, because I know the co-regulation is something that you know is a big part of your pedigree. What's the balance there in early childhood around how important co-regulation is versus, say, because I imagine in early childhood, it's actually hard to really educate, or maybe I'm wrong here, but children, because they might not have language yet, or still developing and comprehending these concepts. So what's the balance there of, like, is co-regulation the main thing, or, what other strategies are put in place, and how do you go about dealing with that?
That's really good. I am going to piggyback off Nicole's, because it seems we're segueing really well with each other, so it's great. Two things. Co-regulation is highly important, but also for children. Children learn really well, actually. They've got incredibly plastic brains. They're very pliable. What we know from neuroscience is what we teach them and we keep repeating becomes their scripts. If their early experiences are a negative adverse, then they develop neural pathways for that. But they also develop a connection between their sensory experiences, so without words, and a feeling of distress. So this is what we start to talk about, what's called, it's called felt safety. So some children, and especially children with trauma, these memories and connections have a felt sense of threat, not safety. Okay, and we have to understand that as educators and as parents, that sometimes the experiences our little people have, especially nonverbal or in utero, or when all brains are forming, is that we are putting down these messages for them, either with language or with behaviours and modelling that makes either children feel a sense of threat or a sense of safety. We can change that, but we have to change it with new practices and talking about the amygdala and flipping your lid. And little people can do it. 2- and 3-year-olds can get it. They may not have the language, but if we talk about things like, if you were a color, what would you be? If you were a fruit, tell me what a fruit you might look like. I use superheroes with a lot of boys, like, what superhero are you today, and why? What makes him special? What are you trying to tell me by being Batman, but yesterday you were Superman, or the day before you were Spider-Man? What's different? So things like that. And we have to realize co-regulation only works with safe relationships, okay? And some of our little people have very confused early relationships. It does not mean that they can't learn new relationships that allow them to have safety, but a lot of children with trauma have some disorganized attachment or a belief of a sense of threat from adults. So our job as the other adults is to show up and say, guess what? I'd love to change that for you, little possum, because I'm going to show up for you to show it's a little bit different. And in safe relations and ships and environments, we use a lot of sensory stuff for children, especially who aren't verbal. We can use touch, voice, smell, sound, tone. And we want to use those so they don't trigger distress. They start to trigger for safety. And so these kids start to put down a blueprint of safety around certain adults. And it's in 3 different ways. It's their inside world. Are they hungry? Are they tired? Do they need to go to the toilet? Their outside stuff. Is the routine predictable? Are the adults predictable? Is the space actually a space where I feel a sense of security? And then there's the between, which is where the beautiful neuroception comes in, is the safety in relationships by detecting other people's emotions and being able to read other people's states. And it's also feeling like you're known to someone, that you matter, that you belong. And that's incredibly crucial for our little people. So what we need to do is relationship first. First step. I spend most of my time in schools and early childhood centres saying, if you spend 3 months on relationship, I'm going to give you the biggest gold star in the whole world. Don't worry about reading and writing and that. That comes. We don't learn from people that we're scared of. We learn from people that we like. We learn when our brains, our little alpha waves are calm, not when they're hypervigilant. So, and as Nicole said, it's these universal strategies. How do we build a calm classroom? Not just for our little trauma kids, for everyone, because then learning happens. Children do better when they have strong and protective relationships. So we need our carers, our parents, our educators to be strong, kind, and committed to these kids, to be the people who take charge. And that means you look after yourself before you enter into the battle of managing someone else's relationship, someone else's dysregulation. And we build villages because we can't do it all the time. They're exhausting our little people. They drain us. So we need to tag team. We have a dance. Who can you tap into? Who's your next dance partner? Let's dance in there. I'm going to tap into you, Hayden. And then you do it for half an hour, and Nicole taps in. It's a dance. We need to keep swapping partners. We don't stay with the same partner all the time. The second thing is we model. So how do we model to children that we can regulate or tell them to regulate? We need to regulate ourselves as adults. So a kid's losing it. We need to breathe really loudly. I'd love a kid saying, God, you breathe really loudly. Brilliant, fab. I love it. Now I can have a conversation because now their learning brain's on. If I'm trying to go, calm down, breathe, you need to sit there, and I'm flustered and distressed, that's not helping. So my best bet's to sit next to that little person and go, boy, this is scary for both of us. I'm just going to breathe here, or I'm just going to sit here. You'll probably have 10 other kids on top of you. That's okay. They're all going to be breathing with you. So we need to model change, and we need to model it. And then we develop a template for them that we can do it. Being predictable, consistent, being trauma informed. Like, yep, you need to know some stuff now. Yeah, you're not you signed up to be educators, but your job morphed now into being social workers as well. And so guess what? You're going to have to learn some social work stuff too. Otherwise, this may not be the space that you want to be in. Maybe adult education's different, or doing some other things. But this is the world of educators now, and I take my hat off to them, because I jumped in being a psychologist into the emotions. I signed up for that beautifully, but I can't teach a lesson to save my life. So I take my hat off to their dual roles. And then it's the connection seeking kids. Children seek connection. So let's use that in order to help co-regulate. We want them to come into our space. When they're scary, we tend to step back. Being brave, I'm going to ask teachers to be brave, step in. I know it's scary, but it ends up being the best thing we can do to let children feel secure, but also it allows us to be curious. It allows us to be really interested in what's going on. And co-regulation breaks down into three things. We love Bruce Perry. Anyone who wants to do a bit of extra reading, go and have a look at Bruce. He does the 3 R's. We regulate first ourselves before we regulate a little person. We relate to them, and then we reason with them. So it means we help them with the fight, flight, freeze, and we use any strategy: breathing, bubbles, bean bags, rocking, singing, humming, crunching ice, sipping on a drink bottle, running around, use a trampoline, anything that's in that space for a child that will help move into a regulatory space. Then we relate to them through connection and attunement. I can see this is really hard for you, or it's scary, or it's frustrating. So we start using our tone and our body and our ability to connect with this child. We want to see this little person. And then we start to reason a little bit later, when their meerkat brain's not up here. It's like really, it's being a very nice little pleasant brain where it wants to sort of be able to use their frontal cortex. And then we start to help them reflect, name their emotion, and help them organize their feelings, and then say, how do you want to change this, sweetheart? What can you do? We've got to give them some agency, because if we do it, we're not there with them 24 hours a day, or they go home to families where they're going to have to use these skills. So let's teach them how to use it. So things like that. There's all sorts of beautiful resources. Nicole's probably got some, I've got some. There's lots of stuff on there to use as regulation things. The key to it is, and Nicole, you chime in as well, but use the ones that you feel comfortable with. Don't pick everything. Go with what you like, and then get confident in that. And then learn to regulate. I hum quite a bit. I sing, I breathe a bit. They're my comfort go-tos, but then I've extended my toolkit as I've been working in this area for 30 years, and I'll use lots of different resources. But the thing is building up your confidence to use some language and some strategies, and seeing it as being with the child is important. Not fixing it or managing the emotion, being with it while they're feeling that emotion. And it's terrifying, because it's terrifying. If you're scared with their big emotions, imagine what a 3-year-old feels. So it's getting in there. And I think that's why we tend to use the regulate, relate, reason. It's an easy thing to remember. It's an easy thing that we have to regulate ourselves, and then we can relate, because our brains only work that way when we feel safe.
Yeah, I think so many great points there. I love the 3 R's, and Nicole, might throw to you on that one, because you know, we were having a session 2 days ago, which was on burnout, that, and
Mm,
how that's affecting educators, and and having to wear so many hats already is, I can imagine someone that's like, oh, another, thing that I need to kind of implement. How do you kind of help in sort of your consultancy and things like that? How do you help them understand the importance of this, and how to take initial steps to build this new capability that they need to lean into to be more effective for themselves, but also in their work?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is that educators, they always want the best for the children, and in order to be able to do this, I think one of the most effective things to do is, like I said, build in universal framework. When educators understand how their brains work, how children's brains work, then it gives them it's a lot more empowering for educators, I feel, because they understand themselves and their own reaction, and they understand children as well. I think that the best thing you can do is actually build those aspects in, and build, like Rebecca said, short taught activities during the day. So often even starting the day or starting a session with a short breathing exercise. With younger children, they love tactile tools. So I particularly love, I've got one here actually.
Oh, you bought one?
I brought one with me. You actually can't see it on the screen. Here we go. It's an ostrich feather. So an ostrich feather, you can get them on Amazon. I don't think they're actually real ostrich feathers, but anyway, they love sensory things. They love things that actually can visually see the breath. But just to answer your question, Hayden, there are lots of little tools, and between Rebecca and I, I'm sure we've got heaps, and know which ones work. Short, sharp routines, getting ahead of it.
Yeah.
Want to get ahead of it. You don't want to wait for the meltdown. Yeah, sure. That's going to be helpful there. But if you actually train educators and train children and work alongside each other, and it becomes part of the daily fabric of your day in short, small bursts integrated to different moments. It can come with the transitions, come at the start of the day. Most children actually come to school or childcare or that preschool, they'd say to me, if I said to them, how are you feeling right now? They'd say, I've had a crazy busy morning. And that in itself can put children into their meerkat. It can put us into our meerkat brain. So even starting the day, doing some short or mindful moments, they don't have to be long. But when educators learn the power of the brain and how to, all the exercises that Rebecca were talking about, actually exercise your vagus nerve, because that's where it runs down through your neck from your brainstem and it's that switch between your fight or flight, so your sympathetic nervous system, and your rest and your digest, which is your calm. So the more breathing tools, the more humming, the more, if you can teach them to gargle, anything that's going to exercise your neck, and the breathing is going to strengthen that vagus nerve, and that vagal tone will switch between that fight or flight and the calm. So you want to build it into the fabric of your day. And if you can do that, then you're more likely to be able to, like Rebecca said, talk about self-regulation tools, and you talk about them when you're not in that moment, so that when you are in that moment, you're more likely to recognize it. And then if a child does flip their lid or have a downstairs moment, like Rebecca said, it's then important to come back afterwards and actually, all right, well, we're actually calm now, we've connected, we've put some strategies in place. Then when you are in that thinking part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, that's when you can actually process the repair. Because you never want to leave it and say, okay, that was okay. No, there are socially acceptable ways to actually deal with situations. And you know what? You flipped your lid, but let's actually talk about how we're going to repair through that, because that is going to further develop that part of the brain. And we want to do both of those things. So, yeah, I hope that helps. But just there are so many tools that can be built in there. But the more I can say, front load it, get ahead of it, have it as part of a normalized part of your day. And if everybody could do that at home and schools and have children, we would have a much better world.
Yeah, for sure. I think You've also given me a bit more permission to just get my vocal pipes going and start a bit more singing. I think that's a great one. There's a couple of small strategies like that that I think are really awesome. And just on your point then at the end, Nicole, how this also needs to extend in the home, and that's almost another education pathway. So I'd love to ask, how do you sort of go about bringing families into this conversation, especially when they might be in denial or unaware of what's going on? Because that's another hat that sounds like it's a tough nut to crack too.
It certainly can be, absolutely. And I think that if you've got a stressed out little person, you've often got a stressed out parent. And so if they're in their meerkat brain as well, they're less likely to actually understand that. That's why I think, again, coming back to getting ahead of it, educating the educators, educating the children, and having sessions where you actually educate the parents, whether that be information sessions, sending things home. In key cases where there might be a child struggling with anything, and that's something that there is a flow through from home, I always think overarching information where everybody's on the same page. So if we're learning about resilience, or if we're learning about kindness, then there needs to be that free flow between an educational setting, whether that be a school or an early learning centre. But if a child is really struggling with a particular concept, one strategy that I find works really well is if you know the right picture book resources, I'll often give a picture book to a parent. Sit down and read My Strong Mind together. Let's talk about some of those strategies, and then supporting the parents through that, because often a picture book is something that they can sit down and read with the child. It actually teaches the parents at the same time. And also it fosters that beautiful connection that often those little people are missing. They're missing that's why they connection seek, because they need that connection, because it's really hard to connect with an adult that's actually not connected with themselves either. So the more you can bring in strategies that actually educate the parents, because parents don't want to be like that. It's just a learned behavior in themselves. But if we can actually foster education that goes three-way between home and the setting and the child, and also there's beautiful picture books out there that will powerfully teach the child and the parent at the same time, and then you build a connection. And that is one very effective strategy. You just got to know the right books. That's all.
Yeah, would love if you've got any recommendations on authors, if you can even pop them in the chat or chat them out. And I'm sure, Rebecca, you've got heaps too. Would love to get my hands on a few of those books.
But there are many.
Oh, but there are, yeah.
There's so many good books. And they
Awesome.
keep coming out.
Yeah, great. Rebecca, any thoughts on that on the family
Yeah,
side as
I'd
well?
love to add on to Nicole's, as she mentioned at the beginning. When we've got kids with big behaviors, we've often got parents with big stuff too. So use the 3 R's with them, regulate with them, and relate. It's about saying parenting is tough. And I see today you've had a really tough day. That's why the kid's acting out, because mum or dad or grandma or whoever's looking after this kid's having a tough thing. So it's embedding all of this into practice. We do what we do with the kids, we do it with the educators. I can regulate, relate, and reason with an educator who's having a hard day. I can do it with a 3-year-old. We can do it with a parent. It's learning to be okay to step into emotional spaces, not feeling as though we have to fix it. We have to learn to be with people and bear witness and not fix. And I think what stops us moving into these spaces sometimes with parents or educators, even with children, is our fear that we have to fix it all. It's not our job to fix it. It's our job to be with them while they work out some of the stuff themselves. And if we can come up with some strategies, or we can be with them in a place when it's really scary or overwhelming, that's a great place. It's a great place for parents too. They've got their own stories too, just as much as the kids do. And sometimes they need someone to validate that story, not have a judgment, not say, well, why aren't you doing something about it? Or if we gave you all these resources, or you have to go and do this training. They'll get to that when they feel a connection with you, when they feel that you're supportive, or that you're supportive of their child, then their brains calm down, and then they're open to reading those books, or trying a strategy at home. Sometimes we have a take-home journal for some of our parents that do our courses, and get them to just have a go of doing it once. Or we might look for connection time. How many, not for an hour, for 5 minutes, when your kid said, hey, mum, can you look at this? Great. Tick, I was able to do that. We're looking for ways for parents to feel enabled and to feel like that they're also the experts. We're not the experts on their children. We might be experts in a range of understanding, or maybe neuroscience or psychology or sensory resources, but actually we're not. We have to learn to be a bit humble as well. Well, Nicole will agree with me. We're learning new stuff every day in this area. There's new books, there's new strategies, there's new concepts, there's new, also everyone is coming out with new stuff. So I think the thing is to work to realize that relationships are really important. Making people feel secure and secure people are brave people. They'll try anything. Kids try stuff, parents will try stuff. So, and as Nicole said, it is embedding it into a holistic village. We all need to know the rules of this village. We have to have the same language. We need to understand that we all want the best for our little people, and that comes from a multifaceted approach, but we do need to communicate with each other and also share the load. Parents get exhausted, so do educators. So because we try to do everything and meet everybody's needs, we don't have to. We can tag team. It's all right to tag team. It's fun.
And I think the other thing too, on top of that, Rebecca, is I think as a society we need to somehow give ourselves some permission to slow down and know how important it is to actually do that. And slowing down doesn't have to be an hour of slowing down. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. It's like you said, Rebecca, it's those small routines of connection. You know, it's quality, not quantity. And that's the same with slowing down as well. But if we learn to do that, to slow down at the start of the day, I bookend the end of my days. And when I do that, my day runs so much better. And I think we often get in that doing energy. I've got to get out of the bed, I've got to do this. And we've got a society of people doing that. If we can learn to slow it down in small moments as parents ourselves, or as educators, or even just to support our children and actually build that. I often say to teachers, build it into your program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Build your slow down moments into your program, and don't look at it as an add-on or oh, that'd be nice. Look at it as an essential. It is essential. It should be essentially part of every human being's day. And if we can do that as a society, we're going to be better off.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Zebby who mentions in their daily routine they choose to do the first 5 minutes to make sure they say something positive to all kids, then start our day with whatever's being planned and having a bit of gratitude or something like that. It's such an important point. And maybe just a final question, and if there's any other questions from the audience, please throw them in the chat. What do you say to educators who might feel like, why do I always have to sort of be the bigger person? Say with, families that they're in your face, you've got to do you've come off from a long day and then you have to be the bigger person again. What do you say to them to help encourage them on that journey?
Well, for a start, 2 meerkats don't make a prefrontal cortex.
Amygdalas love talking to each other, don't they? They have a party.
It doesn't work. So, I mean, ultimately, you're not going to have great relationships. Yeah, it is hard. I'll acknowledge that. If somebody is having a downstairs moment, and if you've been in education long enough, you can see adults do that as well. I think back to what Rebecca and I were talking about before. It is so essential that we build as practices as educators to have a calm, and it's not easy. I know that, but you do need to prioritize it, even if it is bookending the end of each day, to make sure you build those things in. because ultimately you are going to have better relationships with the children and the parents if you can do that. And yeah, like I said before, two amygdalas don't make a prefrontal cortex. You really, the better you can regulate yourself, the better you're going to have better relationships, and you're going to be able to solve problems better for both yourself and the children and the parents.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm
Yeah.
just conscious of time. Any last quick thoughts, Rebecca?
No, I'd like to absolutely agree with Nicole. I think, and it is a skill, you have to work on it. And some days you do it well, and some days you don't do it well. But again, as Nicole said, part of that is that rupture and repair. You also need to repair with yourself as well and forgive yourself if you do lose it. But regulating and realizing that we don't walk on a flat ground. We walk on a place that's full of hills and a few potholes, and we got to learn to jump a little bit, and we got to learn to take a breath. And if we're teaching this to children, we have to be confident in what we teach to children. So start on yourself. It's a really important thing. And as Nicole mentioned before, it doesn't have to be an hour. I work with teachers and parents saying, what can you do in 30 seconds that'll help your brain calm? What can you do in 2 minutes? What can you do in 5 minutes? What can you do in 10 minutes? And then if you're lucky, you get to have an hour. But hot baths and smelly candles don't look after you. Actually, what looks after you is friends, is relationships. It's actually having self-reflection. What could I have done differently? What did I learn from that? And what am I going to do differently next time? They're powerful things that I think we all do, but we minimize and we see that as an add-on or an extra instead of seeing that that is core to our practice of being a person who deals with humans. That's what we do with humans. And whether they're big or little, it doesn't matter. So I think for educators is to look after yourself first. It's like the oxygen mask. Put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your kid or an old person next to you. And that's what educators need to do, is put on their oxygen mask first.
Beautiful. Yeah, well said. That pretty much does us for time, everybody. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Nicole. I learned so much from that session. I've got a lot of scrappy notes here I have to piece together, but I think first thing I'm going to do is have just 2 minutes and do some breathing or maybe some singing, if I can get away with it in the office here.
Go get a journal out.
Yeah.
Do some
So,
reflection.
I will. No, this was such a great session. Thank you so much both for your time. Thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for the questions that have been shot through as well from Zebby there. And hope you have a great rest of your night. We do have one last session, which will be happening in 12 minutes from now, which is Mana's new vision for family engagement. So look forward to seeing you there. That'll be our last one for Campfire. So Mana will be doing a bit of a closing ceremony wrap up there as well. Awesome.
Lovely. Thank
Thanks
you
so
very
much,
much.
everybody. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.